Record. Okay. Welcome everybody to our Care Coordinator information sharing webinar for August. This webinar is recorded, obviously, and we're placing it on our YouTube channel for reference after the session. This is also one of the sessions which is good for 1 hour of Care Coordinator CEH. We'll send you our email, which is always titled Keep This Email 1 Hour Care Coordinator CEH for the session that you're attending. So if you're a care coordinator, that could be very, very helpful. And we want to welcome you on behalf of Delight, Cassandra, and Damon, all from our training team, and of course, Kat, our care coordinator liaison. So welcome everybody. We hope that you're having a great week. And I'm going to go ahead and share our agenda. All right. So this is our agenda for today. We have a few interesting things to go over, and then we'll have time for a bit of Q&A. We wanted to call attention to the Americans with Disabilities Act and the fact that it just celebrated another anniversary. We have an infographic that we can share with you about that, or it's actually just a graphic with a written timeline. It's not that fancy, but we wanted to spend a few minutes thinking about the ADA because it has had an incredible journey and provides the base for a lot of our waiver work that we do today. And also shows you mostly what I like us to understand is that we're part of a rather long story of advocacy, and this is only a piece of it. The ADA is not the be all and end all of the advocacy that was done around waivers. And in looking at this, I realized that I also have to make some kind of a timeline for waivers themselves because they have their own unique history. But they do sort of sit on one of the pieces of legislation that occurred in the ADA's journey. And it's about accessibility. There's a lot more to it than that, but I wanted to call attention to these two concepts here, and thank you, Kat, for the concepts to accentuate that accessibility is what the ADA is all about. Access to places, spaces, modes of transportation, education, and forms of communication that are experienced by the population, the entire population, equal accessibility to experience and utilize those spaces and places and concepts and technologies. So accessibility in its essence is proactive, and it really hopes to remove barriers during the design stage of an event, program, or service. You may have heard, if you've checked out anything about accessible documents or accessible technology products, you might hear the concept of something being baked in, the accessibility being baked in. It's a lot like a building being built with entryways that are accessible, as opposed to an older building that needs to have a long ramp added to it to make it accessible. Or in some of our earlier times, and maybe even happening the present time, people having to use a different entrance to get into a building, like a loading entrance or something like that, because you can roll over the whole thing as opposed to having steps. But that's not the way that people enter a building. That's the way that things enter a building. So the ADA is about accessibility, equal accessibility for all people. And accommodation is a little bit different. Accommodation is reactive, which I'm talking about the really long ramp to make different kinds of turns and twists just to get up that long stairway to that main entrance in a building that wasn't designed that way. It's reactive and strives to remove barriers caused by inaccessible design. It makes sure that people with disabilities have the same access as people without disabilities. It's the same idea, but there's been a lot of work and research and thought around baking things in as opposed to um, retrofitting things. Now, I wanted to ask you if you have an experience that you have for regular life or even your professional life where something that was formerly used only by a person with a disability now seems to be sort of baked into the system. Does anybody have an idea or a thought about that that you'd like to share? You can unmute and do it. You can share. What do you think of this?
Talk to text.
Talk to text. Yeah, that's like on almost every computer, right? Or device. Great, great example. One of the interesting things about technology is that many of the technologies that we take for granted now were developed strictly for people with a disability when they were new, like that, and like touch screens on a phone. So you all in your pocket right now today, or maybe sitting next to your device, if or maybe you're looking at us on it, you are using something which was strictly developed and used for people with experiencing disability. And so, with that thought, I do want us to understand that it holds true. All right, we have captioning, subtitles, closed captioning, text, um, book share, and bumps on the index fingers of a keyboard. Yes, all of these are correct. Push buttons on a phone. Yeah, there's so much we can think about, but the essence of it is like, I just want you to think about that when it's good for someone with a disability, it's good for everyone. So I just want to, sort of honor that thought process. If it's good for a person with a disability, it's good for everybody. So one of the examples that I share is the more common use of universal design, says Katie, you are correct, is the use of touch screens to order food, which is very visual and it's not it doesn't hit everybody's needs for senses, but you can see these touch screens. It's like a gigantic iPad kind of at Costco kiosk, food kiosk, commonly, and also in Taco Bell. So I'm not advertising these at all, but I'm saying that these are places where people can, if you don't read, but you notice a picture and you know what it's a picture of, you can select your food. If you can type your first name using a space on an iPad, you can type your name on the order. If you have because then they'll call it out for you when it's ready. You don't have to wait in line if you're not the type of person who favors waiting, doesn't, you know, doesn't think waiting in line is a thing. And you can just sit down and wait where you're more comfortable. And then they call out your name and then you get your food. You can also pay right there at the kiosk if you have a card. You just put the card in and you pay. So these things are commonly used by everybody, but also accessible for somebody with a disability, or maybe somebody who English is not their first language, or whatever you want to say, with reading skills and things like that. So anyway, that's just I love to see that stuff. I'm happy about that. There's lots of other examples like that. If you use a bank machine, like an ATM and things like that, you'll see a lot more sort of simple, the sequential way that things come at you on a screen based on your selection. Very plain language. Curb cuts at crosswalks, absolutely. They're good for everybody. If I'm carrying packages or rolling a baby carriage, it's good for me too. Um, all of these things. So anyway, that is talking about accessibility and access and being baked in. And I'm going to share the other piece of the story here, which is just a graphic, which is about the ADA. It is now has just recently passed the 34th anniversary of the ADA. And so I invite you to belatedly, but ongoing and forever, celebrate the ADA. So way back in 1986, this is the timeline. There was there was a movement and wording brought forth in our legislative offices nationally about moving toward independence. And the language at that time was thinking about how we were going to make how were we going to create more equity for people with handicaps? And that's what they said in their documents. So a piece was written to propose language and brought to a congressional task force, and that sort of brewed a document which went which was proposed law, which passed the Senate in 1989 and then passed the House in 1990 and was signed on September 26th. I'm sorry, July 26th, 1990. I was looking at the nine. And also in 1990, the regulations were issued. The ADA had five separate titles and they had effective dates, just like you see with our state regs. They have certain timelines that they give to have them roll out, um, and lots of details to work on in between. So 92 to 94, titles 1 through 5 became effective. In 1999, there was a Supreme Court ruling that we call Olmstead, and that was about people having access to care of people who needed facility level of care, such as nursing facility or intermediate care facility level of care, accessing that care in the community as opposed to only in a facility. And this is about Medicaid and states having they already had rules to provide community options, but Olmstead sort of sealed the deal. So that formed the basis for many more states to adopt the waiver programs that we work in now today in Alaska. It completely relates because separating people from their community and having people live in separate places was against the ADA because the ADA is about access to regular spaces, places, modes of transportation, forms of education, and communication for all. 2008, there were amendments signed to the ADA, and these amendments were just more about fully ensuring access and equity. There were some details about equity that didn't come out in law, like what is it really, what is disability exactly, how is it defined? If people take certain medications, is that a disability? There's all kinds of different cases that came up to sort of inform these amendments. In 2010, there was accessible design standards created, which is how to bake it in, basically. 2011, amendments regarding transportation, and 2013, equal employment, and 2014, updates about technology and access to technology. So it's an ongoing story, of course, but I invite you to think about this and to maybe if you want to research the ADA a little bit more on your own and check it out and just understand that it's very important, mostly that we're part of a very big ongoing concept of accessibility in the work that we do. All right. I'm going to go ahead and reshare something in just a minute, but I wanted to find out if anybody had any other thoughts they want to share along the way about the ADA. Do you see
I
yourself as
just,
part of a big wave? Go ahead, sorry.
oh no, Kara, I didn't mean to jump in. I just meant to note that for SDS, it's been a very big push in the past 5 years to really target ADA forms and make forms accessible. And it's something the entire Department of Health is really working towards. And it has been a journey to really on the technology of making documents ADA accessible. And I would encourage you all, if you get a chance, to work with ADA documents or making something ADA, to never throw in the towel on it because it can be very tempting. Um, I know you all love the T24 Harmony Guide. I was the one that made that bad boy accessible. And let me tell you, I wanted to cry at different times because there's so many little pieces to making something accessible. Screenshots, tables, charts, icons. Every single little piece needs to be mapped out so that screen readers can read it. In in a way that makes sense. Because that's where people kind of go to the side. They're like, oh, it's got a title, it's good. It's got a caption, it's good. But it has to make sense to somebody who's listening to it. And so, if you're ever in that situation where you are having to make something ADA accessible and you feel really frustrated because it just seems so difficult to navigate whatever computer system you're working with, it's totally worth it. It really is. And just don't, it's a puzzle to work through to figure out. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, the more in tune you are to baking it in, as Kara said, like knowing how to make it accessible from the start versus having to accommodate it afterwards and try to make a 200-page screenshotted document accessible. And if you're ever in like a real tight spot with ADA stuff, you're always welcome to email me and talk with me about it because I've seen some things. I can try to help you Google your way through it because I know I have.
And accessibility includes also readability, or sometimes I say cognitive accessibility, which is just words that are too long to say people can understand it. So we're also looking at plain language when we say things like that. And I know Delight and Kat and Cassandra and Damon, all of us have been striving for more plain language in our government documents. So they do go through a journey, as you know, that the vetting system and the understanding of what who signs this document and that type of thing is quite the journey. But we are actively pursuing plain language versions of the documents that you would work with to, for your individuals you serve and families to read and sign, or for you to read and ask people to sign, so that it breaks it down a little bit more in some plain terms. But yeah, that's always there. We're hoping to, again, revise our own things too, to include plain language and more understanding, promote clear understanding of things. All right. Well, great. Thank you for your thoughts on this. And it's always a worthy discussion. It's always a great point of reflection. When I get to see things like people being independent and ordering their own food at a kiosk like that, it makes me, welcome the future, because the future is accessible. Okay, I'm going to share for us our next topic, which is habilitative services for habilitation providers. I do also want to share that this is very draft. This is a course that we're working on in our learning management system, the SDS Training Academy, which we are building for habilitation services providers. But everybody's welcome to take it. I mean, you can certainly take this course if you want to. Again, all I have to share today is an outline, but we do get a lot of feedback about the work that care coordinators do and the partnership that you have with our habilitation services providers, and how we put that all together and write it down and put it in a plan, and how it gets read and reviewed and approved or denied with our review teams. So this is a whole circle of professionals that we need um, to vet this through. Luckily, a lot of it has already been vetted. The training content already has been. So yay for that. But the work is never done, and training is always getting revised and updated. So let me go ahead and share this, so that you can see it and know what to expect, at least with our ideas. Find my share. Okay. So our course is going to be pretty comprehensive, and these are the concepts we're going to cover. It's just nickname is just HAB services for HAB providers. Again, you're welcome to take it. It's going to have several chapters, and they go like this. What is habilitation? What's the purpose of it? Person-centered HAB services. What are they about? How do we approach this? What's the person's standpoint? What are some questions we might ask? What are some ways we might explain habilitation services with people we serve, person-centered HAB services, an introduction to goals, objectives, and interventions. This is the target audience here is going to be our providers. Okay. So I know that care coordinators know about these, but our provider base is in need of training and welcomes training. We did bring this to our provider info share session, and we know that not every provider goes to it. That's okay. Um, we're just trying to show it to whoever wants to look at this point as we develop it, so we can get more awareness of it out there and also some feedback about what you'd like to see. All right, intro to goals, objectives, and interventions, habilitative services versus non-habilitative, and who delivers them. That would be an agency with our direct service staff. And what does that look like? How does that relationship look like? What is the meeting? What, when you meet with care coordinator, what does that look like? What's, how does that work? So who delivers the HAB service? The direct service worker and, you know, who could they be? Even if they were a family member, that type of thing. Habilitative goals, objectives, and interventions, a closer look at them to define acquisition, maintenance, and improvement of skills, because it is about skills. It's about getting new ones or learning skills, keeping skills, discovering skills, getting better at something. So we're going to talk about that. What is a goal? Developing and writing goals, including who does what. So a goal being that it comes from the person. How do we break that down and make that into operational steps that'll work for the person and work for our staff and work for the service? Because all those things have to match. What's an objective? Who does what? Objective being the step a person can work on towards a goal. So how far do we break them down? What's a little bit about task analysis and sort of alluding into the teaching skills part? What is an intervention? An action the staff will take to help a person. This is like offering an objective. So a staff will do what to start the process or notice something about the person and then do what. So an intervention is the support of the staff. How much do you do? How much do you not do? What do you document when a person seems to be getting like some mastery over a skill? What do you bring forth if a person wants to change it? What if they just don't want to do it? What if I don't want to change the trash bag anymore? Well, then what? That type of thing. Teaching skills for habilitation services. These are some ways that a person, a professional, direct care, anybody, family, they could approach the teaching part of it through this lens. A risk assessment. So what about where the teaching is done could be a risk to that person? Are we going to be outside in the community? What are their risks? What are the person's risks there? Are we going to be in the bathroom when a skill is taught? What's the risk there? Maybe the person doesn't feel hot water. Are we going to teach a person to turn on a bath for themselves? There's a risk there because if they can't feel hot water or they don't know how to operate the faucet, or that's just something somebody else does for them, there's still a risk there. So there's that. A risk assessment of the environment that the teaching is taking place in. Task analysis, which is where we break a task down into as many steps as needed for the person to follow. And it doesn't matter how small they are or how big they are. Really, a person, some people who we support, well, let's put it this way. Everybody takes cues from their environment, right? So as an independent person, most of my cues and my, I guess you would call it executive functioning, is built up over time and over years. So for me to know how to make decisions about what to do next, sometimes I've gone to school to learn that. Sometimes I've learned it from my regular environment. Well, because we work with people who are getting teaching in their regular environment, this is how we want to figure out how to put in some teaching. We want to look at the task at hand and we want to make some reasonable proposed steps in that task. We want to break it down so that the person can succeed step by step to the task at hand. ultimately, independence looks like this. I am able to get cues from my environment in order to decide to do the next thing, and I can do that next thing. And sometimes I'm not physically able to do so. Sometimes I don't know enough to do so. And it holds true for all of us. But wherever that person is in that journey about getting cues from their natural environment, that is sort of the gold standard of habilitation, is being able to function in your everyday environment, getting cues from your environment. In some cases, people will need human assistance and, of course, lifelong, because that's what level of care is. So people will probably get that people will have mastery over certain skills and then they won't. They'll move to different skills and then they become disinterested in them. And that's why it's exciting, because this is the story of person-centered everyday help for everyday things. And that's what we get to do when we look at it this way, when we look at habilitation services this way. What does this do to create freedom for the person? How does me offering this objective and intervention, how does that create freedom for my person? These are the questions that we'll talk you through and providers through in this training. So teaching methodologies, there are several, right? And this is not like the only that there is. And this is not the state says you have to use these. No, this is just some ideas and some common ways that people get information and receive education, I guess you could call it, through a habilitative service. People get the opportunity to practice, right? If I never try the thing, I can't learn it. If I never fail it, I can't learn it. That's why you have risk assessment, because if failure means injury, then that's not going to be a thing. It has to be safe for the person to learn. You're going to have to break it down another way. So opportunities to practice, the concept of error-free learning, because a person is not, I'm not going to go through my everyday task and feel disempowered about myself and through my supports because I'm always making mistakes. That is not how we teach in habilitation services. We use error-free learning, so that will be described. The concept of getting a person's attention is step one. How do we get someone's attention so that they're ready to learn? How do they understand they're going to learn something? Using patience. It's hard to work in this field because a lot of the times it's like, well, I could just do that for the person. We want to make sure the person gets their opportunities to practice. So we want to use patience with that. And we don't want to, you know, getting into over prompting and over cueing people and things like that. It doesn't, then that becomes the activity itself, just the cueing and the prompting. We have to be able to be patient with people and let people think and take information in their own speed in order to expect some kind of new, understanding on their part. Reinforcement is finding something that the person really likes that they can get in as a part of these steps. How do we reinforce it? How do we reinforce? So if I ask for something, maybe I learn to ask for something that I really like, and to asking and using whatever communication method I have that works for me to ask for it. And then I get the thing. If I really love root beer, I use my iPad to ask for a root beer. That would be my reinforcement. Modeling, where I observe or participate somehow in a person doing the task, and then I try it myself with guidance. Backward chaining, where a task is completed, then I break it down. Like if the task is making a pizza, the last thing that we do is, I guess I'm not going to count the cooking part, but the last thing that you do is you put on the topping, like the cheese and the pepperoni or whatever you like on it. Maybe a person could learn by starting that step and then they get to eat the pizza right away. That's the reinforcement part. And so next time we make one, then we go back a few steps and then they participate in putting the sauce on, then the cheese, then the pepperoni. See what I'm saying? That's backward chaining. Forward chaining is the same thing, except you build steps from before the task is started to beginning it, adding to that the middle of the task, the almost the end, and then the end, beginning, middle to end is what I'm trying to say. That's what forward chaining is. Total task chaining could be for people who maybe have certain sense of a certain ability around the whole task, and we could explain or model the whole thing for a while until a person participates partially in it, but it's just taking the whole task. Or another good example is, I guess a good example is like if I have on the wall, a chart that says first this, then that, the schedule of my day in pictures. That is how I would present to my person that this is what we're going to do. First this, then that, then that. And that would be like a total chain, like the whole day. Today we're going to spend this much time doing this, then we're going to do that, or not even time. Just say, if it's residential service, here's what we do in the morning, here's what we do in the afternoon, here's what we do in the evening. Verbal prompting is just like it says, you say it. Physical prompting might be a little touch, like you touch a person's elbow, you touch a person's shoulder or something that like that to remind them. Uh, Physical prompting could also be like a hand under hand or hand over hand for somebody until they begin to feel what it's like, and if to do that thing or part of that thing with their hand, to make a signature or part of whatever it is that they're going to do, draw or something like that, write, use a machine, use a device. Reminders would be just like it says, if a person sort of loses momentum after a while, how will we remind them? And fading supports is where, as people get mastery over pieces of skills, where we're going to focus on other things and give people reminders, but no longer make that a main focus of the task at hand. So we'll have lots about that. We'll have documenting HAB services, which is referenced to our already existing documentation course. So we're not going to duplicate it here. We'll just include that as an offshoot of this. Um, Updating HAB services and documenting progress toward previous goals and objectives and adapting interventions. Um, that's going to take some research, I think. That's why I had it highlighted here. I certainly welcome your thoughts on what you encounter with people, with our providers, and our collection of these these items. So I would love it if you could either email us or perhaps even share in the session here your thoughts. I know that you might have a lot of thoughts. If you do, just go ahead and email us about that. And again, this is an outline; it's not done. So we'll be talking more about what that is. So when we update them, we're going to want to document progress. We're going to want to adapt interventions. So what should our providers be aware of around that? And special communication or special considerations, behavior being a form of communication, and how to support people to get their needs met in safe, productive ways. I certainly have worked with some of you and had experience with people letting me know that their needs are not being met, or their needs are being met in ways that aren't functioning, that aren't safe to the person, or don't bring dignity to the person, because people are always telling us what they need somehow. So how do we give people a more functional choice in getting their need met? We do talk a lot, and we've talked with care coordinators a lot about extinguishing behaviors and challenging behaviors and things like that. Great, these things do exist, but there's still communication. So what is the person telling us without judgment to the actual action they're doing? How can we offer safer supports, more varied supports? How can we offer more novelty in their life, perhaps? Um, what could we do with a plan for safety that would allow that person to get their needs met or to communicate in a safer way? Do people have access to robust forms of communication? How is this creating freedom for my person? If a person is having challenging behaviors to get my attention, what do they have at hand to communicate that to me that isn't a challenging behavior. And you'd be surprised how many people don't have access to communication. Then they haven't used speech or have speech therapy or, you know the top 10 signs or for sign language, that type of thing. So there's lots to talk about in that. This will be quite the comprehensive course, I think. Some of it will be anyway. And then at the end, I put knowing the scope of home and community-based services because it does come a point where home and community-based services aren't what a person really needs. If a person, for example, if a person is really not safe in their services, or the staff isn't safe, or somebody's sick or something like that, and we haven't discovered what's going on with that person, it might be time to call a professional, just to give those boundaries around it, because a person does have health care, they do have other professional services available to them, they do have 911 and local emergency services available to them, and meaning like home and community based services are not, the be all and end all in all cases. There might be some times when whatever's happening just exceeds the scope of that service, or maybe the person wants something that isn't included in that. So I don't know, maybe they don't want employment services anymore. They just want to have their job. You know, that's it's up to the person. So the scope of it is as such. So these are discussions that could be part of a hard time of life or could be part of a great time of life, depending on, who your team is. You might have dissenting voices in a team like that, for people wanting to exit services. Anyway, I've said a lot. I just really wanted to introduce that to you, and hopefully get your thoughts. And I know we have at least one or two other things to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Um,
Kara, there's a lot of really great feedback within the
Great.
chat that I think is really worth acknowledging, that there was some really thoughtful
Hmm.
responses, particularly about
Hmm.
progress towards previous goals and educating
Great.
providers about
I
how
see that.
harmony works. Because it's not straightforward, and it is a lot of clicks, and it doesn't always show up on the plan the way that would make the most sense. So, I think it's completely fair and really important to explain that to folks, because then they think it's something really quick and easy for a fix, and it's
Hmm.
not. It's a
It's
harmony
not.
system. So
Yeah.
we
We will.
acknowledge that, we own that,
Yeah.
and we'll continue to work on that. We're continuing to work on that particular section because we recognize it's one of the most difficult to navigate in harmony, as
Yeah.
a whole. So thank you for those thoughts.
Yeah, it's great. And yeah, we're the first thing we do when we make a new course is we have our staff take it. Okay, so they have an opportunity to see what it is that we're doing. They can knit that together with their experiences and their work. The terms are not the same as what's in Harmony. It really isn't, it doesn't really filter down to it being a grid out thing for Harmony. Okay, this is conceptual. This is for our provider. You could certainly write these things in a plan, but this is for a provider to understand how to teach a person, or to give them some thoughts about how to teach a person. Because how many times have I been working with a provider and they're like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what would help this person. Well, did you ever let them try the very end of the task and see what happens, and then let them try more as it finishes, because that's the reward. This is that type of thing. It's not really a plug-in to Harmony. And I definitely appreciate all your feedback here. I'm not able to read it all out loud here for us, but you can certainly read it. We can certainly we keep a record of our training here. Um, yeah.
These are definitely awesome concepts. I think that it's worth acknowledging in our session with the providers, in the last info share we had with them. We did talk about progress towards previous goals and the idea of who's supposed to write what. And in the chat, I can see that we are having some difficulty with that. And as far as understanding that the agency does need to provide the progress towards goals they were supposed to be measuring, right? They make a measurable objective and they can give data about it. And what we found is that there is some confusion about giving context to that data because SDS does not want a chart that just says 73% of the time progress has been made. That is not effective in getting context for that data. Was that, and so it's important for the agency to give context to that data of 73% of the time that outcome occurred with one certain staffer because that staffer worked the best with them, or giving context to the progress, giving a narrative context to quantitative data. So what about the care coordinator? Because this is where we have some miscommunications. The care coordinator does need to give progress towards previous goals in like a holistic approach, like looking at all these different service environments, different pieces, different data. That's all great and all, but how was this person's year? Did they get progress towards their personal goal? That's something that the care coordinator supports and gives some context to. So agencies have to give their service notes upon request. It's in their conditions of participation. They have to give some context, that narrative context of like, well, what does this data mean? Like you're giving me a chart that says 87.9, like that's not even a full unit, like give context. And the care coordinator can get that information, but also look at these other pieces in this person's life, not just service-based, but also like in their personal goals within their lifestyle, not just HAB related. So we found that there was some misunderstanding about that, about who's supposed to do what. It's more than just like a percentage. Progress needs some context of, the as far as progress and the challenges and the barriers and how that works, like what does that data mean? That's from the agency because they're working directly with that person on that specific goal. But the care coordinator also provides progress in a larger sense, working with the person to kind of consider that and add that to the plan. So we're going to make sure that we give a little bit more guidance in that discussion because it's not always so simple, especially in your planning teams. But we do know that there is a departure in understanding about providing that information. Yes,
Thank you,
data
Delight.
and plain language. We want to know, like, what does 87% mean? That could mean,
Yeah, I love all these
so.
comments. Thank you so much. Yeah, again, it's not gonna that's not gonna fix anything because that's it's not possible. But it's gonna try to give some information and we'll see what people think. I mean, give it a year after we intro it to start seeing, different things come out with teams and different practices happen. I really believe people want to do the right thing with their services and really want to, have data that's workable and things like that. I think it's good. So give us time and we'll get this rolling. It takes some.
Sometimes,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about starting the conversation and understanding where some of the blockages are in that, and so that we can work together to make a more
Mhm.
effective plan for Alaskans, right? Because we don't want to boil people down to a number of percentiles. People are
Mhm.
more than that. So thinking about giving data context.
All right. Well, thank you again. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about this in the coming months. And there are a few things left on our agenda. Does anybody want to jump in or any staff you want to talk about anything we've talked about just today or anything?
I could talk about I some of the attachments. I'm gonna attach them again into the chat. I had already emailed out to everybody, but the Osaka conference is coming up in October. if you look at the agenda that's attached, and it's also on the website, it's actually a really good agenda. There's good speakers, really good topics. There's a topic on Social Security. I think that we've gotten a number of questions about that. It's, I think, only $45 or $50 to register for that, which is not a terrible amount, I think, for a training of this quality. So take a look at it. See, maybe you're interested. I think they might be offering CH as well. You will have to contact them directly to check that. But I think that's a really good one. I don't know if Delight, you wanted to add anything. Thanks.
I can try to share that. I clicked on the website, Asaga. They're a great resource for
I
family
think
guardians. Go ahead.
Kat dropped it in the attachments, so she's going to try to drop it again.
Okay, cool. So this is just the conference agenda. It's at the Energy Center in Anchorage. Full agenda and speaker bios. I won't go there, but embracing the challenge, crisis to opportunity, Tracy Bowles, guardianship after a crisis, culturally responsive trauma-informed communication. Lunchtime mentoring and monitoring Alaska court system, mentoring and monitoring program, I should say. And then ethical considerations and decision making for adults, forging connections, wrap up, and they have snacks and meals, catering. And I believe it said it was $50 in person or 45 for a Zoom. So you don't have to go in person even. How cool is that? Yeah,
And
Asaga
you
has a
get
lot.
contact hours.
And you do, yeah. Thanks, Cassandra. Yeah, the Asaga has programs that are classes available to family guardians or people facing they get a lot of questions around end of life and people's income and things like that. They're a pretty good resource for that. I know that there's a series coming up, and you know, there's kind of a monthly series on different topics that are of interest to family guardians. So you could just check out that website, Asaga AK, and there's plenty going on over there. If you go in person, there's food. Yes. All right. Question, would the write-up on progress on goals and objectives by the care coordinator require the care coordinator to interpret what the agencies provide as their progress on goals and objectives? I don't know about interpret, but summarize is good. And you could also kind of verify with the agency that your summary is correct. You could say, hey, is that right? Did I get it right? That type of thing.
We don't want you to be interpreting data that you didn't create. That is concerning. We want you to verify and that progress. So there is a distinction there. And it all comes down to that idea of what I would, if I was in that, would say, help me understand what this means in the simplest ways. Like, what does this mean? How have we changed from where we, especially on a renewal, how are we at the start of the year to now? Like, what happened? How did we progress? Or did we have any setbacks, which are totally normal, by the way, in learning, where you have regressions and progressions? What happened? And so sometimes you need to use that narrative, tell it to me plain, to explain. We need people to explain it a different way, because a chart won't go into the nuance, to the detail of like what actually helped this person learn this like their goal, like learn their objective, right? Learn in that context. That's what we're looking for. And we're hoping that you, as the care coordinator, can do really slick, smart stuff, like see how one agency is doing something and say, have you guys tried what they're doing? You know, you're doing different services, but they're having really big results and they're doing something different. What are you guys, what's different? And learning different ways people communicate. That's why we want you to take the holistic picture, because we have all these different agencies and they don't all work together, but they serve the same person. How can we support that? So that's a big, role for you, but you don't need to make up or interpret their data. You need to know, you just need it to be explained to you in plain language so you can give it context. You can use the percentages that they spit out in those tables, but give context to them. And that context has to come from the agency delivering the service.
And I'm showing our agenda again. We just have our notes on resources. These are resources available to you and or providers and families. Care coordination support office hours every Thursday, 8 to 9 a.m. This was given to us by care coordinators, the time and day, as a likely good day for you without being busy, even though it is early. Provider support office hours, Thursdays 3 to 4. Providers are welcome to join us. Same training team you have here with you, and care coordinator liaison. Also, care coordinators are providers, so you could come to that one too. Family and individual.
And then also, sorry, Carol, for the provider info shares, the first one of the month, we have residential licensing come to.
Yes, we do.
Right.
And the office hour, Kat, you said provider info share.
office
The
hour.
Oh yeah, sorry,
hour.
office hours. Yep.
So we had our first one this past last
we
week.
did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we had some providers come to chat with the licensing staff, assisted living licensing staff, and boy, I learned a lot. And so if you are working with providers and they're like, I noticed that licensing on their website, they have a webinar now every month. So they're doing, they're getting out there a little bit more. I do know that they're short staffed. Okay, so that's a patience thing there. But anyway, the first Thursday of the month that they will be with us in this office hour. So a provider can come and ask specific questions about licensing stuff and get an answer right from them with us there too. Family and individual office hours, first and third Monday during the lunch hour. Just easiest for people to not have to take time off work just to join us. We picture this happening with a care coordinator. You could give the person the link and they could join us on their own, or you could join too and you could say, I'll be there too. Your family or individual has a question for the state, wants to know something, you're working with somebody and this understanding isn't happening, well, you could bring the person to our office hour, or just give them the link and we're happy to help. And it's the same crew, it's us. Okay, so we're gonna give the information to the person in terms they can understand in a friendly way and a welcoming way. And we've had quite a few people come, and very, very heartfelt and wonderful stories. And it's just really has been a joy. And so we welcome more people to come. Our YouTube channel is there for your reference for recorded meetings and other, sometimes other units will put up an informational video through us there. The policy YouTube channel has all the policy outreach that they do. And of course, the training academy, which I know that almost every care coordinator is already a member of. But if you are not and have not taken a training there, I urge you to go ahead and create a learner profile. We do all our trainings through it. We've had it for a little over a year, so it's cycled through. We actually were able to expand it a little bit and get some more seats, if you will, annual seats that it is no charge to individuals and to our care coordinators. It is for Medicaid waiver and regular Medicaid service providers. So we're working on having alternatives actually, well, not alternatives, but having paired trainings that are for individuals and families that are plain language versions of the trainings we put in the academy. So people don't have to go in the academy and have a membership and remember the password and all that. They can just search something on YouTube and maybe find a video, of that. But this is a work in progress. Just know that, we're hoping to have a counterpart in plain language for people and families, for Alaskans at large, if you will, everybody in our YouTube. They won't be for credit. They're just going to be there for people to know, people who want to know those things. So anyway, that is all I have for today.
Well, perfect timing because we have about 4 minutes left. So, I mean, we can answer any people way into this rainy day in South Central, or if you have additional questions, I mean,
Level of care issues. Okay.
I'm just gonna say
Um,
yes.
yes, with
That one.
the team is short staffed. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Kat.
Yeah, sure. And I don't know if you're talking about IDD or NFLOC or assessment, but
NFLOC.
yes.
It was about NFLOC. Folks are waiting for levels of care.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never seen a delay over 2 months for
Yes.
people that are clearly eligible. So I'm pretty concerned. And I've talked to at least 3 other care coordinators who are at a 2-month mark on level of care for NFLOC unit.
It's initials, right? It's for initials.
All initials,
Yeah.
all waiting,
you could,
all
guys,
burning out
if
of
you
money, all concerned. Yeah.
Email me. I got that email, the one you had sent the other day, and I know Molly was looking at it. But email me and anybody else who is waiting for over 30 days for a level of care for from any unit. Just email me and I could follow up with them. And things sometimes get lost in the shuffle, and sometimes there's a QC process that they do for initials when they do quality check, or there's a second level review. Not all of that is always marked in harmony. So if you email me, I could take a look or get answers from the assessment teams. But definitely send me an email.
All right. There's a question about flooding, people experiencing flooding. My best answer is please email us with this question and your concerns. That way we can, call for team backup. We certainly have had folks displaced by different kinds of natural things in the past. It's not like it never happened. But when I see this, I just want to make sure I ask units, what's the best way for folks to approach this so that we can get you a good answer. Okay. So if you
and
can
I
email us,
guess,
please. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and if you can give a little bit more information on, um, if you're changing providers or something like that, an amendment makes sense, but the service just isn't being delivered and you're not sure it's ever going to be delivered. Those are kind of like distinctions like that. Like, and I understand that you are in an emergency situation, so you may not have that kind of information. But let us kind of see what we can view as guidance. We don't want you to using time to do amendments that are not necessary. So let us look, okay? Well, a change of status is a great idea, like, or if necessary, a CIR, if there's any, like, if it falls within the CIR kind of category. But let us look into it for you.
Okay. Well, thank you for your great communication. You can always email us. You can email us and request, you can come to our office hours if that's available to you. You can email us your question and we can get back with you with an email, or you can request a phone call, a particular question that you have pertaining to your practice. And that's what I have. It's just coming up on the top of the hour. Thanks again, everybody. We'll go ahead and close this session. Thanks for everything that you do, and stay in touch.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank
Bye for
you.
now.
Bye, guys.